Hello everyone and welcome to Super Rugby on Forever Sports for today's 5 things learned after round 5 of Super Rugby Unlocked. And another very interesting weekend, and I think, the longer this tournament keeps going, the more we start learning about sort of things that, it's just the more we can really take away from the things we learn, really, and it's more sort of accurate. Looking at the first couple of rounds, it was difficult to sort of identify long-term issues or long-term pros or cons or whatever, because obviously after the lockdown there was so much there's so much time that was needed before the teams sort out internal issues and stuff like that. But now we are starting to see a clearer and more accurate picture about where each team is, where certain players are, and looking at the future where things need to change. So we're going to be looking at 5 things that we learned from the round 5, and I think things that are sort of quite long term in many ways, and quite structural in terms of not an easy necessarily fix or a quick fix, something a bit more long term that needs to be sort of a bit more sort of a process. So before we get any further, please do consider subscribing. Bottom right hand corner there, smash a like, jump in the comments. We have so much cool content coming up. We're going to start live watch alongs as of next week, which is very, very exciting. Lots of stuff planned to make them really, really cool. So please make sure you subscribe so that you become part of the channel. Without any further ado, let's head over to number 1 and get stuck into what we have learned. Right, so I think looking over the weekend, a lot can be said about the officiating recently, and I hate complaining about referees. I absolutely hate it because I think fans it becomes such an easy way of dismissing bigger problems to just say, oh, the ref, oh, the ref, oh, the ref this, the ref that. So I really don't enjoy going after officials, and especially somebody who is officiated not at any sort of high capacity, but just at the most junior levels. You realize just from refereeing a very, very basic a junior game that it's so difficult, and it's one of those things where you do get things wrong, and you'll get something wrong and you'll know almost immediately that was the wrong call, but you have to live and die by that call, and you have to be confident, and you have to be confident in your decision making. However, I do feel, especially in the Cheetahs Sharks game, that there was just some pretty low stand, really. And I think in the past we've had some very, very good referees in South Africa, and we've always been quite privileged to have some top officials. But it just does feel that there's a bit of a slide in the standard of refereeing. And I don't think there's any bias, which is a good thing. I don't think there's any bias, particularly in the Cheetahs Sharks game. I just felt that there were pretty poor calls on both sides, which is you can get over. To be fair, I'd rather have standard of refereeing not being good enough than being biased. If it's a case of a ref just getting a couple of things wrong with both sides, in theory it should still be a relatively equal encounter. It just comes down to them, I think, just being a bit more accurate, a bit cleaning it up. But as I say, I hate going after referees. I don't want to sort of harp on too much, but I just think that is something that SARA needs to look at, and trying to just up the standard of refereeing a little bit. But look, sometimes it can just take a while to adapt to new rules and stuff like that, so hopefully that can be sorted out relatively quickly. Moving on to number 2. Something a little bit controversial maybe, but I still watch WILLEMSE and think that he's got all the attributes to make a fantastic, wonderful rugby player, but not at fly half. I said it from the very beginning when he first started playing there. I just sat there. You watch the school highlights, all the clips and everything like that, and it was a player dancing through tackles and running through things and getting in at number 10 and scoring tries, which is great. But for me, a fly half is so much more than just that flair, and a fly half needs to be someone that controls the game, that gets their backline going. Lots of us play rugby, and when you're at that young age, you get told how important the fly half is in terms of the decision making, and that they're kind of a player that everyone else plays around. Same as a scrum half. They're not necessarily the focal point. In terms of, they're not necessarily the ones that will score the tries and do everything like that, but they are the biggest decision maker. And I just think that we're wasting WILLEMSE's potential, because I think we've got someone who is decent on defense and very creative on the attack. He's got a lethal step, he's got a fantastic turn of pace, and he can kick a ball. I think his goal kicking needs a lot of work, and I think that moving him away from fly half, bringing a recognized fly half at the Stormers, for example, would just release him. And I just think that, you see like how wonderful Warwick Galant is currently playing. There's no reason why WILLEMSE couldn't be doing a similar role at fullback. The problem is now they do have Galant at fullback. Look, if I was the Stormers, I would have rather brought in a fly half and kept WILLEMSE at fullback. So there is maybe possible experiment to put WILLEMSE at inside centre and let him run an inside centre. And not the necessarily traditional hard-hitting Damien Delindi, Andre Esterhazen, even Johan Jans van Rensburg type centre. But we're seeing Cornel Hendricks doing a job. Look, he is bigger than WILLEMSE, but WILLEMSE's not a small player by any means. He's not necessarily that big hard-hitting player, but he's not a small player, and he's quite happy to embrace the physical part of this. And I just think that you take a bit of responsibility away from it and instead make him a focal point of the attack, and we will get a much better player out of him. I just think he's being a bit wasted and just under so much pressure that he hasn't really been able to develop. There's no doubt about the quality. He's deserved his Springbok call-ups. He's deserved all the accolades. I think he's been a bit rushed because I think that we've done the typical South African thing where we see a really talented young player and we kind of just push them through without letting them really develop. But I just do find that when he had those 10, 15 minutes at fullback on the weekend, he just looked so much better and so much more devastating. So let me know in the comments what you think of that situation. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Bulls are back. Bulls are back. As Bulls fans, you'll look at Saturday and think it was a fantastic performance, but the mark of true champions is the ability to win ugly. That is literally it. And I think in many ways that's why everybody thought that England were going to win the World Cup, because they sort of managed to completely outplay New Zealand, and maybe not always play the most attractive or expansive sort of game, but they pitched up and they managed to win ugly. And I think it's been harsh to England, because I think they were very, very good against the All Blacks. They were the better side. But a side like the Bulls this weekend were not necessarily a better side than the Lions, but more clinical. And that ability to win ugly, the ability to underperform in many ways and still get a result, is how you win titles. At the end of the day, it's all very well having these fantastic games, but if you then play badly and lose all the time, when you do have an off day, it's limiting. A team that can play subpar, maybe not execute everything correctly, and still find 4 points, 5 points. Those are teams that can win titles, because at the end of the day, you will never put in a 10 out of 10 performance every single week. So when you can still win at 6 out of 10, that's when you've got a winning formula. A team like the Lions, we've seen in the past, they could beat any side. They could beat any side in the competition during that 3-year thing. They probably, if they pitched up, were probably the best side in the competition. But they struggle with the ability to win ugly. When they weren't quite there, they couldn't get over the line, which is why they missed out on those titles. And I think that's something that the Bulls are showing, and that's a very big positive, because they'll need that moving forward to any competition ahead. Right, so looking at the Lions, I just think that we've seen now 3 matches where they are in the game. Stormers, they were in the game. Sharks, they were in the game. Bulls, they were in the game. You could argue that 2 or 3 of those games, they were arguably many ways the better side in terms of the overall game, in terms of sort of the way they played, a bit more flair. They're always a very attractive side to watch. They're lacking experience. They're lacking that clinical aspect of the game, which comes with experience. And I just think that there are certain positions in the Lions which they really miss some of the old guard. The likes of a Malcolm Marx in the centre of the scrum, the likes of a Franco Mastered in the locks, even a Warren Whiteley in the loose trio. They're just missing those big impact experienced players that just get the job done and really step up when the going gets a bit tough. It's such a young side, so much talent there. There's no doubt about it, and I'm very unfortunate Johnny Lombard, who's one of the most talented players, faces another 9 months on the sidelines. Just completely gut for him. Now he's done an ACL on both sides, but I really hope he does come back, because he's such a talented player. It is a future Springbok if he does. But we were just talking about it, and the Lions going overseas and potentially having pounds and all this new money and stuff like that, they would do so well to bring certain players back to the Union, or not necessarily ex-players of the Lions itself, but just to bring some experience. And I don't mean experience in the likes of Willem Alberts and Yanni du Plessis. I mean, the invaluable experience there is, but more sort of players in their prime. We're talking about sort of 27, 28-year-old players in their prime, playing their best rugby right now. Franco Mastered, as I said, Malcolm Marx, Ackerman Jr., all those sort of players, are players that the Lions are missing, I think, at the moment. Because I just think that sometimes when the going gets tough, they just don't have enough players who can sort of step up and say, listen, I'll take God. I mean, you look at the experience. You're thinking Marvin Orie, you're thinking Alton Yankees, and you're thinking Berger Oendal in the midfield, who's still quite new in the Union. After that, it's an incredibly inexperienced side. I mean, your big positions, in the front row, Jakob Asaki played many years, but still quite new at the Union. Carly Sardi's still trying to establish Torre had a bit of a weird career, still trying to establish. Ruben Schoolman, a young player. The entire loose trio is quite young and sort of upcoming. So I just to say, I think we're just missing that bit of experience and those sort of some key players in key positions. If they can sort that out, they can really be, and they can still be a top side. Look, I think the jury's still out on the management side of things, but it's too early to make that call, and we have to wait to see what happens there. I just think that they do need a bit more experience. Now, a team that should be doing so much better, in my opinion, should be dominating this competition, is the Stormers. I think, and it's the same thing for years now. For years, the Stormers have just underperformed and underperformed. And look, a lot of people said that it was under Alistair Coetzee, they just couldn't do it and they weren't good enough. But I think you're seeing a similar thing under Job Dobson, where they've got the squad, they've got the players. You look at, if you want to pick a 1 through 15 and you say, we need this, we need that, we need that. Stormers tick all the boxes. They've got physicality, they've got flair, they've got experience, they've got youngsters, they've got power. They've got big players in big positions. Bongi Manami, World Cup winner at hooker. They've got really good locks, so the lineups are sorted. When it comes to loose play, they've got really talented loose forwards. They've got a Herschel Yankee, also World Cup winner at scrum half. They've got Damien WILLEMSE, the next up and coming player at fly half. They've got Warwick Galant at fullback. These big positions, they've got really, really good players, but they're still not performing to the highest levels, and they were very good against Griquas. The problem is that they've failed to produce performances like the Griquas against the bigger sides. And I think that there's something structurally wrong within the Stormers that I don't know if it's a mental thing or what the issue is, but there's something needs to change in that unit to get that side playing to their ability, because they are so much better individually than they are producing. I just think they've got, you look at that side and they are littered, first of all, littered with Springboks itself, in the likes of Frans Malherbe, Stephen Kitsop, Bongi Manambi, Sia Kalisidi, Damien WILLEMSE, Warwick Galant, Herschel Yankee. There's so many players there. And then you've got sort of the next generation, Salman Murat, Joano Augustus. Ricus Pretorius did very well become a Springbok one day. And lots of potential. And it's just such a nice blend that something is wrong. And whether it's the coaching staff, whether there are issues within the union, something needs to change so that Stormers can really start performing. And this all needs to happen now, because next year we move to Pro 16. These 4 teams have to give a good showing. We have to give a good showing. And if that means bringing in some players and spending some money, so be it. But we need to ensure that if the Springboks are going to continue to be this dominant force in world rugby, our standards in world rugby have actually increased. And we need to be competitive at a local level, because that's always been a bit of a downer. The Springboks have always been quite strong, but locally we've always struggled to compete in the sort of international competitions, and that needs to change. If we are moving towards a more professional game, club level rugby is growing immensely. We are starting to see a trend like we see in football, and if that's going to be the case, South African unions need to step up very quickly and catch up to the curve. But let me know what your thoughts are down at the bottom there. Bottom right hand corner there, please do consider subscribing, smash a like, jump in the comments. Previews coming up for all the matches as well as reactions. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven, and I'll see you very soon.